All right. Hello. I hope everyone can hear me. This is my first time moderating one of these sessions for Mark, and I want to lead off by telling you a little bit about who we're going to be meeting with today. I actually feel very fortunate to have him on. So the story goes back about half a year ago. I was attending an event called the ICCE Congress. It's the International Center for Coaching Excellence. It was their Congress in Tokyo. So this is an opportunity for me to welcome in all of you coaches to be able to meet with some of the people that I've had the opportunity to network with and meet at these events. So at the ICCE Congress in Tokyo, I had the opportunity to meet with a guy named he's Dr. Tim Baghurst, and he is a professor of education and the director of a coaching program at the Florida State University. And one of the things that resonated with me when I met with Tim was, first I was learning from him, listening to him speak and going, okay, this guy's really on the ball, and I'm getting something from this conversation from this guy. One of the things that made it so powerful for me is because I meet people who are academics or practitioners, and some who say they're sort of pracademics, that they're sort of blending those two worlds. But this guy really was. He was actually an academic who understood the coaching profession and was a coach himself. So that's that's a unicorn amongst us. So it was a thrill to meet him, and then I continued to follow him after I returned home from this event. So when Mark asked me, is there somebody that I'd like to invite in to speak to share with you guys, Tim was at the forefront of my mind, and I'm absolutely thrilled that he agreed to join us today. So I'd like to invite Dr. Tim Baghurst to join us.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. And I'm smiling, Matthew, because you called me a unicorn.
Well, but I hope you understand where I'm going with that.
I do. Yeah. It was just funny. I was just laughing off screen. He called me a unicorn.
But I think it's true, because we do have a lot of coaches who only have the anecdotal evidence of their own experience to draw from, and then we have academics who are doing studies, and there's not a lot of people that are bridging those two worlds. And so it was a thrill to meet somebody who really does that. And you are an author. I don't know, I'm going to try and get you to explain a little bit to everyone who you are here, but you've authored over 100 peer-reviewed articles, you've authored several books, and you use what you have learned through your studies and your research and brought it into the profession of coaching. So I think we're lucky to have you. And one of the things that I think would be important, and if I can just turn the mic over to you for a little while, could you talk to us a little bit about your background, your professional pathway from, athlete to academic, and how all of this happened?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for having me and for inviting me. It's a real privilege, and we have a great responsibility when we're on the air to try to be time efficient and share something that might benefit people. So I'm not going to go too much into my background beyond to say that I started in England. I'm originally from England. I did multiple programs in England, undergrad, 2 master's degrees in England before moving to the US and doing another master's, and then my PhD. Now, part of the reason that happened is situational. Part of the reason is that I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. And part of it is that I kind of knew what I wanted to do, but I couldn't find a home where I could do it. And coaching is what I've always been interested in, and it started in sports science in undergrad. But this was 20 years ago. There weren't coaching education programs. There weren't coaching science programs, athletic coaching programs. And so I tried to fit things into what I was interested in rather than being able to pursue what I really wanted to do. And so that's really given me a passion to build those programs at university level to reach those people who, like myself, wanted to be a coach and didn't really have the infrastructure on how to train to do it. That in itself is interesting because it means that a lot of people who are teaching in coaching ed programs, such as myself, were never formally trained in coaching ed. Now, yes, we have coaching qualifications. Yes, we have coaching experience. One of the things you mentioned about being a academic is the academics and the coaching. I still coach. I still coach privately. Summer coaches, but I coach athletes because it's important for us to stay current with what's going on, to work with athletes who, you know, are different to what we were as athletes maybe 20 years ago. And so I still want to stay connected to doing that on the side, so that when I go into my classes, it's not when I was a coach 15 years ago, it's, this is what I saw last week. How would you deal with this? So that's what I'm trying to do, is develop programs that are coaching focused for those who really do want to become coaches or want to improve their coaching education as they are right now as coaches, and offer something that a lot of us wanted to do and never could.
So you alluded to what you're doing now, but you didn't really tell us much about the FSU coaching program.
That's
so
correct.
Could you jump in and tell me a little bit more specifically about the program that
Sure.
you are running now?
Sure. So I came to Florida State a year ago. I'd been at Oklahoma State for 7 years and developed some coaching ed programs there, but was really attracted by the opportunity here to start a center for coaching. And the reason I wanted to do this is one, I like a challenge, right? I want to start something new and grow something from the beginning. But also, you know, a center looks beyond just the programs. A lot of universities are very inwardly focused. Let me develop a program in this area, and let's bring students in and create tuition dollars, and then everybody's happy and I'm doing a great job. I'll do some service on the side and some research, and we're good. The center itself is designed, we designed it with the idea of how do we go outward. Yes, we want students coming into our programs. We want to develop great coach educators. We want to develop great coaches. But then how do we support other organizations with best practices, with research, with grant support, with offering clinics and all these things? This is where the center is a little different to a lot of academic programs, because we have the academic programs, but we also have the outreach that is a real central focus of the center. The other thing that the center does is it doesn't fit within a department. And so there's some pros and cons to that. And I've spoken to other organizations about how this works, but essentially the idea here is that if you're in a department, often you're stuck within the faculty's experiences, knowledge, politics, committees, and you can get bogged down in not being able to do really what you want to do as a center. The dean allowed me to develop the center as a university level center, which means that I'm independent of departments. And so if I need support from sports psychology, I can go to sports psychology and ask for help there, or sport management, sport nutrition. And so we're getting the best of all of the worlds in the center, supporting the programming and development, as opposed to what sometimes happens, which is we protect our own here and you protect your own here. And then we don't really have that collaboration and that interdisciplinary focus, which is why FSU COACH is actually, the rest of it is Interdisciplinary Center for Athletic Coaching. We want to build bridges. We want to get the expertise from across a university, from across departments, rather than be really internally focused.
So who are your students? If I was going to take a look at one of your students, are these people that are already out professionally coaching and want to upgrade their knowledge? Or are these people straight out of high school going, I think I'm interested in becoming a coach, and how do I find a path to professional coaching?
So we're 6 months into the programming. The center was opened in the fall. We started programming in January. So we have our kind of first batch of students enrolled. And what we're seeing is this: we created a graduate certificate. It's called a Graduate Certificate in Athletic Coaching. It's all online and it's 4 classes. You take a theory of coaching, you take an ethics class in coaching, you take some kind of internship or practicum, depending on whether you are coaching or you want to be a coach. And then you take an elective based on what you're interested in, whether it's sport media, sport management, sport psych, you name it. So the idea here is to give you the fundamentals of coaching to make sure you're doing it in a safe and ethical manner, and then have some experience doing it before you walk out of the door. Don't actually walk out the door because it's online. So that's a mute point there. Now, where we go from this, I'm building out a master's degree, which will again be online. My hope is that it will start in January. The paperwork's done. We're just waiting for rubber stamps, hopefully. And I just spoke with our dean a few months ago about developing an undergraduate certificate as well, because we have a lot of students who want to be coaches. And right now what we're saying is no, not until you have a degree. Well, then they're going to get their degree in something they don't necessarily want to get their degree in. And we're denying them that opportunity to get expertise in the field that they really want to pursue as an undergraduate student. Long-term goal, I'd love to have an EDD or PhD in coaching here. That's what I want to see happen, but I have to build out the master's first, one thing at a time. Who those students are? Well, they're graduate students first and foremost. About half of them come from Florida State in other areas. So I have some in teacher education, sport management, the kind of human sciences, exercise science fields. They're kind of adding it on to their degree as well, I'm going to be an athletic director. This is a great opportunity for me to learn coaching so that when I work with coaches, I have an understanding of what they're talking about or the things that they have to experience or go through. So that's half of the group. And then the other half of the group are professionals out in schools and colleges. I have collegiate coaches who have enrolled in this. One of them applied last week, and the rationale was, oh, I'm not a head coach. I want to be a head coach. I know I need to know more. So that's why they're enrolling in this program. Some of them are school teachers. I do this on the side. I need to get better at what I do, that kind of thing. So it's very mixed. It's very diverse, but I really like that because then in class we get a lot of different opinions of different experiences across the sports spectrum.
You mentioned internship, I think, as one of the 4 programs in the graduate certificate program. That's one of the classes they would take as sort of an internship. How are you figuring out where they're doing those internships? Are you using your network of contacts, or what about for a coach who's already coaching professionally and maybe that's their full-time job? They're adding this on the side. How do they fit that internship in?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The class is called Internship, and originally when I started the certificate, my thinking was to attract people who maybe aren't currently coaching. And what we're seeing is a lot of people who are taking this are coaching right now, or, COVID aside, they're coaching. And so what we did is we changed the format of this to kind of meet the needs of the individual who is doing it. For example, if I have that collegiate coach who's working 60 hours a week and doing all these things in their normal job, why would I ask them to go and, observe a volleyball coach in the community? It doesn't, it could be valuable, but it doesn't really make sense to fit within their current employment and their current life. So we changed it so that if you're not coaching currently, maybe you want to be a coach and this is kind of your first step, then the internship is for you. We look for places, you look for places. If you can find somewhere where you think this will be a good fit, I know this person, I can learn a lot from them, great, we'll facilitate that happening. If not, we will try and find a place for you wherever you're working or living. The practicum side of it is a little different because I want to recognize people who currently are coaching. So instead of them going somewhere else and having to spend additional hours doing what they're currently already doing, instead we bring in an expert from either that area or one of us observing virtually, assuming they don't live in Tallahassee, and a lot of them don't. So that when they're coaching, we can start providing systematic observations, feedback, reflection, having them keep journals of their experiences. And so it's more of an intensive experience with the practicum about their current situation, rather than I'm going somewhere new and just observing and maybe helping out a coach a little bit.
It sounds like the program is all done online. Do the students interact with each other in some way, or what's the method of their interaction with you? And I guess I also am curious if you're the only teacher, or if there's other people inside the faculty.
So the first question, the classes are set up either synchronous or asynchronous. So some of them can be done just in your own time, right? You meet your deadlines and you just do your online discussions and things like that. And then some of them, we require students to be online at a specific time. So for example, yesterday in my class, all my students met online on Zoom, 9:30 a.m., and we have group discussions, or one of the students presents, or whatever it may be. So yes, there is that crossover. And I think that's important in a program. You want to learn from the perspectives of others that go beyond just somebody writing out a discussion post. It changes the way that we learn. And it was interesting because when one of my classes was set up to be no meeting together as a group. And that was the way it was designed. And then COVID happened. And I changed it. And I said, look, I don't think this is healthy in this environment. I want us to start meeting together. Let's find a convenient time for everybody. And let's start having that interaction, because we're all stuck at home. We've lost that community. We've lost that interaction with our colleagues. So let's do that ourselves. And so that was very successful. In fact, one of the students asked, can we keep doing this in the next classes? And so this summer, that's what I've done, is I've made periodic times where we all meet as a group. So I think there's definitely value in that, and learning and listening to other people's perspectives. The second question you asked was?
Actually, another question. I have a follow-up to something you just said.
Okay.
You mentioned you were all meeting together as a group. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, how many people are in that group? How many students do you have right now?
Yeah, we can do that because we're still small. We started in January, which we actually had about 2 weeks to recruit people to sign up to this program before the window shut for enrollment. And so it was a very, very short window. And even now, the window, August 1st, is the deadline for fall. So if students are not enrolled in the certificate program by August 1st, you're not going to enroll until January. So there's some very hard cutoff dates in academics. It's not just sign up whenever. So we had 2 weeks. So we had a small group in the spring. I think I had 5 in my class. So it made it quite easy and convenient to do this. Coming into the fall, I think we've crossed the 20 barrier for students enrolled in this program. And I think, I think our goal was 15 in the first year. And so we're at 20 in 6 months. So there's clear interest, even without being able to go out to communities and sports organizations and things. We're all stuck at home. There's still that interest, which is exciting. It shows that people are interested in this field and care about improving their professionalism. So
how many can you handle? At what point are you going to have to turn people away?
Great question. And I just lost my background. What just happened there? That was weird.
It's back.
I don't know yet. I know some online degree programs have 500 in their master's in coaching. We're not doing that. We're absolutely not doing that. And you can quote me on that, because I don't want this to be some kind of just cash cow for a university. This is about making connections with coaches, having relationships with them, following them throughout their career, developing that network to support them. This is, and in order to do that, we as faculty need to know those coaches. We can't just, treat these students as numbers. I've been treated that way before. I know how it feels. I'd never want to be in that kind of program again. So I don't know. We're not there yet. The other question I remembered was about faculty, who's teaching in the faculty. Well, yours truly started a year ago as a person of one. And I was fortunate to be able to hire somebody coming in next month who's going to be supporting me as another faculty member. She comes from a completely different background. I come from the kind of small niche sports, the ones who don't have so much support financially, who may not be collegiate sports. She comes from the college system, has been coaching in college, so there's a nice blend there of different perspectives and experiences. And then, of course, we have all the adjuncts who come in and teach the specialist classes for the electives, for example. One of those who's been a huge proponent of our program is the chair of the executive committee for USA Volleyball. And, is in the Volleyball Hall of Fame, coached for 30 years. And so to be able to rely on those kind of people to offer classes is fantastic, because they have so much more experience than any of us do. It's just awesome to be able to bring those people in.
I'm thinking about this group that Mark has built here that we're speaking to, more than 2,000 coaches. It's a very international group. I know we started this in Canada, but it's branched over from Canada to the United States, people from Europe, people perhaps around the world. Are you able to take international students into a program like this if it's interesting for them? What are the admission requirements?
Yeah, actually, there are no additional requirements. The online certificate is non-degree seeking, so the application is pretty straightforward. You then apply to the certificate, which is, again, it's a very short questionnaire, resume, what classes are you interested in taking? It comes to me. I look it over. Normally I ask to meet with the student via Zoom just to have a conversation about answering questions. This is kind of what we expect from you. And that's it. The international students are also eligible for scholarships. We're gaining support at FSU and in the community for what we're trying to do here, which is change the landscape of coaching, increase the professionalism, make it a very standardized, high level expectations, and as a consequence, better coaches. And so we've been able to secure some scholarships too for students, and international students are just as what's the word? Not applicable. Just as have the same opportunity as anyone else to receive those scholarships. So yeah, absolutely. And as you know, I came to the U.S. as an international student, and I've lived in several countries and studied in several countries. And as you know, as what I spoke about in Tokyo, I have a passion for international students and international student athletes. So I'm always looking for, how do we bring in those students as well? Because there's such a unique perspective from other countries and other cultures and other ethnicities.
In what you just said there, one of the things that resonated with me was you mentioned the landscape of coaching, and you referred to coaching as a profession. Mm-hmm. So I guess this is a two-part question. Is coaching a profession? And what does the landscape of coaching education look like across the United States? We have your program, but how common are programs like yours across the United States?
Okay.
Two-part question.
Is it a profession? Yes, absolutely. It is a profession. And when I was at Oklahoma State, I went there as a professor of physical education. I started the coaching programs because I saw coaches in the state of Oklahoma who were doing their jobs unqualified. And I don't mean just uncertified. I mean like no training. I met a teacher who was coaching a sport they'd never played before or never coached before. They don't know anything about the sport. And that really bothered me and started this process of we need to change this. Now, is it a profession? Yeah, people make a living from this, not just collegiately, but especially in the US from a club level. If you go in the Department of Labor and Statistics, you'll see statistics about the growth of the coaching profession and how it's supposed to grow 10 to 11% over the next 10 years. That's a lot of coaches. And, if you think about how many coaches there are in Florida alone, I think there's 9,000 high school coaches.
Wow.
Well, you start thinking about how many coaches there, how are they educated? Are they good at their jobs? Are they trying to get better? Some, absolutely, but not all. And we need to change that. The more professional we become as a coach, as coach educators and as coaches, the more respect we get, the more likely it is that we're going to do our jobs well and be treated differently. And I say treated differently in not as a negative, but as in a, you know what you're doing, as opposed to the current view, which is anybody can coach. And that's one of the challenges that continues to go through, society. My wife and I were watching a movie about a basketball coach last night. It's a fiction, but basketball coach became head coach out of the blue because they'd been a great player at the high school. And they walked in, they'd never coached before. They'd never had any training. They didn't know anything other than what they'd done as an athlete. And we see that a lot. And I would argue, Matthew, if we hold that same model, then, next time you need some dental work, just come see me and I'll take care of you. Because I've been to a dentist, I've watched a dentist work, so I should be pretty good at it. We know that's ridiculous, but then why does it happen in coaching? We just assume, well, I was a great athlete, or I was part of a team. I watch a lot of sports, therefore I know how to coach. Why do we have this view in coaching, but not in other professions? So is it a profession? Yes, absolutely. Does it need to be more standardized? Do we need more training and professionalism? Yes, absolutely. So second part was kind of coaching in the United States. Most sports within the US have their own coaching programs. Usually they're tied to the Olympic sports, a USA soccer, a USA volleyball. They all have their own coaching programs to get certified. And then there are academic programs in the US. Obviously, FSU COACH is one. It's a new one. There are some out there who have been around for quite a while. In total, I would say, based on the research I've done, we're looking at about 120 programs in the US at the collegiate level. That includes master's, undergraduate degrees, certificates, minors, all of them. That's a rough guesstimate, but it's more than you would originally think. The challenge that we have is what is being taught in those programs, who is teaching in those programs. And the challenge is a lot of times you'll see people who are maybe not certified as coaches, maybe not trained as coaches, have little coaching experience, who are being put into these because, you're in kinesiology or sports science, you should be fine teaching this class. And so while we have a lot of coaching ed programs, coach development programs, a lot of those programs may not have the training and experience to really offer a great program. It's more of an add-on. So if I can continue real quickly, thinking about how you develop a coaching ed program, this is what normally happens. You and I are in a department, okay? We'll call it a department of sports science. And you have a background in psychology, and I have a background in PE. And we say, you know what, the department chair comes to us and says, I'm hearing a lot about coaching, and I think it's going to be a popular program. I want you guys to develop some kind of coaching ed program. Okay, so what do? Well, budgets are a problem. We can't just go hire people for new classes. So we say, okay, let's use the classes that we have in psychology and PE, and let's kind of pool them all together and maybe add one or two coaching things in the title or change the names. And look, we've got this coaching program. Isn't it great? And now we can advertise it. And now you and I are teaching in these classes, and we may be changing it slightly, but we may not have that coaching experience. That's what normally happens, because we're as a university, we can't just go create 8 new classes and hire 2 more faculty on the hope that we build a program. It happens in reverse. Get students in your program and then we'll add faculty, kind of thing. One of the neat things about where I am at FSU COACH is we're doing it the right way, where we're building a master's program. We're adding, I can't remember the number, but it's 7 or 8 brand new classes, all with coaching in the title, all being taught by people who are currently or former coaches. That's what's exciting, because I know that we're building a program that is meeting the needs of coaches rather than pulling in things just to make it work from an academic point of view. And that's important, I think.
It is. One of the things you mentioned was that in Florida, there's 9,000 plus coaches working at the high school level.
Mm-hmm.
In there, you mentioned how we don't know if, are they doing a good job? We don't know if they're doing a good job. Are they good coaches? Or are they not good coaches? I believe it's an area that you're working on and studying these days is sort of coaching assessment. So
Right.
I guess my question to you is, are organizations doing a good job right now of assessing coaches? And if not, where's the gap?
Organizations is a big term. It encompasses a lot of things. And good job is a vague term that requires some clarification. Some are. I'm going to be vague because I have to be. Some are, some are not, some aren't doing anything. The thing that I have seen over the last 12 months is I've been approached by a couple of organizations to help them develop coaching education, which is exciting. It's important to them. They're looking at doing it. At the same time, I fear that a lot of organizations are doing it in a manner where they're not trained to do this. They don't have the knowledge and experience to do it. And I'll give you an example that happened last week where I had an email from a coach from a major sports organization in the US. And the email was, in essence, Tim, I've been asked to develop a coaching ed program for our organization, and I've never done anything like this, and I don't know what to do. Now, fortunately, they reached out to me. And so, we're going to set up a conversation and kind of guide through this process of how do we make it systematic? How do we ensure that people are learning what they're supposed to be learning and all these things? But most of those people in that situation, they don't reach out, and they kind of put something together with the kind of, well, this is good enough, or I think it works. And then as a consequence, we find that maybe it doesn't. So there's other people who are doing research in this area too. Andy Driska, for example, was at Tokyo and presented on this topic, where some organizations are using face-to-face, some are using blended, some are using online. The outcomes are mixed. What are the outcomes? Are you looking for, Matthew to know the rules of gymnastics when he comes out after a weekend course, and he's a better coach because he knows the rules and then doesn't shout at the referees or umpires or judges? Or is it we want to make Matthew more thoughtful about how he interacts with his athletes? There's so many different areas of coaching education and what needs to be learned that when we put together a program, we need to understand first off, what are we trying to get our coaches to learn? When it comes to coach evaluation, that doesn't happen very much at all. And, as you know, and I interviewed you last week for my FSU Coach Live program, almost no coaches get evaluated in any kind of formal measure beyond maybe an athletic director coming in and, checking some boxes, or the athletes evaluating the coach at the end of the year. There's no kind of observational evaluation where I, maybe as an external observer, come in and watch Matthew coach, sit down with Matthew and provide some objective feedback. This is what I saw. This is maybe where you could improve. These are some things you did well. And I don't have any kind of impact on whether you get raises, whether I know you really well. It's very objective. We don't see that very much. We see it in physical education and teacher education. We see it a lot. We see a lot of observations. We see a lot of personal reflection, even in our training. I mean, I was trained as a teacher. We did this all the time. We observed ourselves. We had other people observe us. Our peers observed us. Our superiors observed us. I mean, we were observed all the time. And then I went into coaching, and it doesn't happen. And so my question is, why not?
Which is ironic, because really a coach is a teacher, so it's actually
exactly. It should be the same. It should be the same. And ideally, you want those coaches to say, hey, I want to get better. Can you come and observe me? I want some feedback. And I do that as a professor every semester. Virtually, it's a little difficult now, but when I was in class, every semester I had somebody come in and observe me teach. Not because I had to, but because I want some feedback from a different perspective. How should I do this? Do you have any ideas for this? How do I get better? We need coaches to do that the same. Unfortunately, a lot of coaches don't voluntarily say, hey, I want to get better, come in and observe me coach. And so we need some systematic things in place. And I will say, not only does that help make the coach better, but it also might avoid some of the issues that we're having in the coaching profession with ethics and some of the behaviors that are occurring that are being found out. If these coaches are being observed on a regular basis, then over time, we're going to start seeing and hearing those things, and we're able then to address them, as opposed to, as I saw in an article recently, 9 years of coaching before the coach gets fired for all the emotional and physical abuse that they've given to these kids. I think that if we're evaluating that coach on a regular basis, that some of that will be picked up, and then that can be addressed early, as opposed to, well, who was watching that coach? Nobody. Well, did the owner do an evaluation? Well, the owner, why would they do an evaluation when the gymnastics coach is successful? They're bringing in trophies. They must be good. They're doing fine. So that's why I think the external objective assessment needs to happen, as opposed to the internal, which is so common.
Have you developed a formal system of coaching evaluation? And if you have, are there columns? Like, what would you be looking for? If you're going in and doing an evaluation, you mentioned feedback, maybe the kind of feedback the coach is giving and the kind of feedback you would need to give to the coach. But is there like a list of key points that you'd be evaluating and looking for, or criteria, or can you describe to me what that might look like?
So I haven't developed one yet. That's kind of one of my long-term goals, is to develop something that really works and covers more than just a segment. There are dozens of coach evaluation tools out there. Literally, there are dozens. And if anybody would be interested in seeing some of them, just send me an email. I'll be happy to send you a list. There's from all different areas and for all different reasons. Some are for youth, some are for adults. Some look at feedback, some look at emotions, some look at time management or movement around a gym or field. There's so many different types. The thing that I think that is missing from all of them is kind of that holistic view. There's a lot of them that are very narrow in what they're looking for, which is fine if that's what you think that they need to be aware of. And so, for example, let's say you're a coach and I'm observing you systematically over the course of the season. I might come in and use different observation tools to look for different things so that you can see different areas of your coaching. But I think there's something missing, which is that holistic one that looks not just at what you do coaching, but looks at what your planning is, that looks at your rationale for why you're doing what you're doing, that looks at, can you reflect on your own coaching to see how you might improve it? And so, again, this occurs in teacher education, and I used to do this for the Department of Education at Arkansas, where we would systematically observe a teacher teaching. We would do a pre-interview to understand why they're doing what they're doing, what their plan is, why their plan is like this. Do they know their students? We see them teach, and then we ask them to reflect on that teach. And then we allow follow-up questions so that we get a broader view than just, I walk in, observe Matthew, coach, here's some things I think you can improve on, and I'm out the door. Are you doing the small detail things as well, before and after, that really make you better at what you do? So that's my goal. I'd like to develop that. It's going to take time. It's going to take testing and all that fun stuff, which I'm not really looking forward to, but has to be done in order for us to develop something that really works.
It's funny, you mentioned, testing is something you're not looking forward to, but that's research, and knowing that you've written, I think I started this off, and I hope I said at the beginning, you've more than 100 peer-reviewed abstracts that you've written. You're obviously a prolific researcher, and it's sort of funny then to hear you say something like, well, I'm not really looking forward to that chapter of it. So maybe that's I'm not sure how to make sense of that, but it seems like that's something that you really invest in, is research and what's on the bleeding edge. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, not at all. Anybody who's out there and has done research knows that a lot of it is just a grind. It's just a lot of work of doing paperwork, of finding participants, of going and doing the observations, analyzing the data. It's not easy. Anybody who knows this or who's done it understands that there's a lot of work that goes in behind the final product of, look what I found, or here's what we did. That's the fun part. The fun part is finding out what the outcomes, but there's a lot of preparation and work that goes in before that. When it comes to the bleeding edge, that's a strange term.
Sorry, it's my own term. I think of things as being cutting edge, like best practices are sort of cutting edge. It's what we're all doing. But if you really want to get ahead of your competitors, it's not really about best practices. It's about next practices and doing something that's even beyond the cutting edge. So I don't know where I picked up that term bleeding edge, if I stole it from somebody or if it just came out of my own mind. But that's what I mean by bleeding edge.
It's a Halloween term.
Yeah, but it's like beyond, maybe we don't have the research or the abstracts for it yet, but that somebody's working on now. And it's right at the edge of best practices that we might all adopt in a year or two once we all know it, but it's what's being studied now. I would sort of love to piggyback on all the work and research you do and ask you a bit of a question to just dump on you, and I don't know where you'll go with it. What's next? What are you studying? What are you studying now that we might all go, wow, that's the next paper you're going to write?
Yeah, I would love to be able to drop some kind of groundbreaking, thing. But I was talking with a faculty member yesterday, and just the fact that research rarely is research that stuff that we produce that is just nobody's ever heard of before. It's just, this is just mind blowing. No, research is building on the work of other people and changing it slightly and improving it slightly and trying it a different way. That's how research works. And over time we see change and we build upon the research of others. Coach evaluation is an area I think that has to change and has to be built upon. And I would love to see every organization have some kind of system in place. The area I think that is a hot topic right now that, again, I'm interested in is looking at coach stress and burnout. I think it's an area that has not really been talked about a lot. It's kind of pushed under the carpet. Coaches work in incredible hours. One might argue far too much. They put enormous pressure on themselves and on their families and on their physical and mental well-being. And many times we see that has a knock-on effect in their own health and the health of their relationships, et cetera. And so if you look at don't quote me on this, but I believe the average duration of a coach is 3 years in the profession.
Wow.
Well, why are you coaching only for 3 years? Because the stress is so high, because partly by yourself, but partly on organizations and fans and all these other factors that come in. And so if a coach what happens if the stress levels are higher than your skills to compensate for them? The stress level becomes too high, and we see a breakdown, essentially burnout. And so we're seeing that happen in coaching, where coaches are just saying, it's not worth it. I'm not doing it anymore. Or they don't do it well, or they continue to do it, but at the cost of, their children or their spouse or something like that. So I think understanding that stress and burnout is a very real issue in coaching is important. We need to understand better how it's happening, but then we also need to develop the systems in place to support coaches in that. It's very hard to tell a coach to not work so hard, right? Or take time off. But if organizations can provide platforms that allow them either to either forces them to do that or provides them with ways to make their job less stressful, then their careers are longer and chances are more successful, and chances are the organization is more successful because of it. So think, for example, if I'm a team owner and I bring in a coach and I'm paying this coach a lot of money to be successful, and I'm putting tons and tons of pressure on them and not giving them any way to deal with that pressure, then guess what? In 3 years' time, I'm having to find a new coach because the coaches either quit or have had to fire them because they're unsuccessful, because they're stressed out. And now I'm going through this whole process again. So I think it's very important for sports organizations, whether it be the national level, international level, or even at the local level, to find ways to find out what is causing these stressors and how can we help you with them, whether it's training, whether it's support systems, whether it's time frames, where we say at this time, everyone needs to go home because we can't do anymore. You shouldn't be doing anymore. And you'll hear stories of coaches who are sleeping in the office. They have a cot in their office and they just sleep at the office because they got to get up the next morning and continue. We know this isn't healthy. We know it doesn't help performance, but from a coaching perspective, there's always more to be done. So I continue to do more. I feel like I'm never done. And maybe you need that mentor, or maybe you need that advisor or somebody or therapist in place to say, it's okay. You don't have to do all that tonight. You can go home to your family. So I think this
resonates so well, because even as you're saying this, I was going back through my own career and I was reflecting on, I remember sleeping in the gym, and then shortly after that, you talked about sleeping in the office. I can remember being a gymnastics coach and just sleeping on a mat because I knew I was going to have a Zadiadka and morning training coming up the next morning. So I have done that, and it's funny hearing you say it, how it resonates with me. And I feel like we do have a huge gap in the understanding of anybody that doesn't actually coach and hasn't lived this life, in what is required and the dedication that it takes, but also how we have lost so many coaches. This is super powerful what you're saying. I'm super interested in this.
I had a graduate student, his name is Bob Pearson, and he did his dissertation on stress and burnout in swimming coaches. And we just had it published, I think, a month ago. So if anybody's interested in the article, just please send me a message. I'll be happy to send it to you. And we looked at, does stress differ by the level of college you're coaching in? So if you're in Canada, the US has generally three divisions: Division 1, 2, and 3. And Division 1 obviously is the highest, and there's a great expectation to be successful, to win. You have a much bigger budget. There it goes again. You have a much bigger budget. You have more support staff. You have all this, but you got to win. Division 2 is kind of a blend, and Division 3 is you don't give scholarships. You really don't have much of a budget, but you do a lot of the other stuff. You book the hotels, you do the travel, and all these things. And we really expected Division 1, their stress levels are going to be through the roof, because you're literally, if you don't win, you're fired, you're gone. Division 3, you don't win. Hey, if you got student athletes who are graduating and doing pretty well, it's not so much of a factor. So the upshot, I guess, of it is, oh, my background's going again. That's so weird. The upshot of it is that when we looked at it, what we found was that stress levels were the same throughout. So Division 1, Division 2, and Division 3, there were no differences in stress levels. And that surprised us. And then we looked a little deeper and we started to see that the types of stress they experienced differed based on the level they were in. And so then you start to understand, okay, if I'm providing some kind of, if I'm providing some kind of training, right? Stress training or something like that to collegiate coaches, this is the kind of research that helps me define what I offer, what kind of training I offer, depending on the kind of coach I'm working with. Because what they experience, the stress they experience, differs. So I need to understand that. I need to understand who I'm working with before I provide that. And what we see most times in any kind of coach development, coach education is a lot of cookie cutter, programming. Take this online course, which just goes back to the end, how you were talking about, do you have your students meet together as a group? Yeah. And I meet them all individually before they come in the program because I want to know who they are and what their needs are, and what they want to do. The same thing goes when it comes to stress. We need to know. The other thing we found out, which is pretty significant, I don't think particularly unsurprising, is that female coaches had higher levels of stress. And I think that's supported across the research in that females are going to experience higher levels of stress. Why? Maybe they don't have the support in place. Maybe the pressure's higher. Certainly what we found on the report was their kind of time role, their time management was much more difficult, possibly because of family commitments with children and things like that. That's speculation. We couldn't ask those questions, but that's what we found. No differences between overall, differences in what they got stressed about. And then females in general women are gonna have higher levels of stress in general.
It's that's an interesting thing to follow up on as well, because coaching is a disproportionately male activity. If I look at the number of professional coaches, anecdotally, that we had inside of Cirque du Soleil, inside of the circus, we had as many female performers as male performers. Yet by the time we got up to the coaching level, we were disproportionately male, and actually made some intentional hiring choices to try and encourage female candidates to come into the profession. But I only had anecdotal reasons why, like those things that you mentioned, like maybe it was family or maybe it was, I would love to understand better why that is.
So, on my FSU Coach Live interviews, I've interviewed a lot of female coaches or sports administrators, athletic directors, things like that. And one of the things that the theme that seems to keep coming out as well, that may be tied to this, that is worthy of investigation, is kind of that mentor role model that they don't have. As you mentioned, the proportion of female coaches is lower, therefore they may not have the same mentorship opportunities of getting somebody who's successful as a female coach to work with them and support them, whereas it might be a lot easier with the male coaches. And so and we're starting to see some females coaching in male sports. Last week, I interviewed an NFL coach who's female, and she talked about some of that, and even conversations with her and others kind of suggest that there needs to be more mentorship in women coaches. And so it's exciting to see some female coaching organizations providing coach education and coach support for women, because it's needed. They don't have the same access to a coaching population who've been there and done it and can be a mentor. So it's definitely a need.
Tim, I do want to be respectful of your time, and I've had you for almost an hour now. But a few minutes ago, you did mention if anybody wants to get in contact with you, you'd be willing to send them some information. If somebody wanted to contact you, we haven't said how they might do that. Can you tell us how somebody could reach out to you?
So email is always a great way to do it. It's just my first initial last name, T Baghurst @fsu.edu. So TBAGHURST @fsu.edu. Also available on social media. You'll find me on Facebook, Twitter, the usual platforms. And of course, FSU Coach is also around as well. So you Google Tim Baghurst, you should be able to find something somewhere. It's not that hard.
Well, I really do appreciate you coming on. One thing that I've noticed is anytime that we've spoken and I have a question for you, you actually have a good and well thought out answer no matter what I ask. So you're a super easy guy to listen to, and I've enjoyed speaking to you. I learn something every time we connect. So thank you for joining us on Efficient Coaching.
My pleasure, and thanks for having me and all of you who are watching.
All right, my pleasure. All right, I'll sign off to all the world here. Thank you so much.